How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
My son texted me on break from school this morning and said the boys have started calling each other Tylenol Americans instead of autistic when they do something dumb. That's how that news is playing out. Goodness gracious. Welcome, it's Eric Erickson here. Let's get to the news before anything else. We have a shooting at an ICE facility in Texas. And I want to play for you the flow of the news here so that you get a sense of it. And I want to start with John Miller. Now, this happened as word broke. Kristi Noem announced the shooting this morning on social media, and all the news networks began to break into it. John Miller is CNN's national security correspondent. He's got really good sources. And this is before the press conference, and there's a reason I want to play this one for you.
All right, I want to bring in John Miller, our chief law enforcement and intelligence analyst. John, what are you learning from your sources about this?
Well, it's very fluid, and as Chief Ramsey pointed out, they are sorting through who is this gunman, what is the identity, what is the background, what are the messages connected with this shooting, and that is something we may learn in the course of the press conference in terms of messages. But where we are right this minute is, as Chief Ramsey framed it, we don't know whether this was an anti-migrant shooting because of the victimology who was struck, or whether this is an anti-ICE shooting. And the governor's statements about assassination suggest he has some information that we don't have yet, and that may not be entirely clear to authorities. So the press conference is going to be very pivotal.
Press conference is going to be very pivotal. That was John Miller. And you notice he did say victimology because ICE agents have been shot, a couple critically wounded, but it was actually an illegal immigrant who was killed. And so there was a divide before the press conference. It was this, for example, someone suggested it might have been a cartel attack on this illegal immigrant, the illegal immigrant being killed. And the ICE agents wounded. It could have been an anti-illegal immigrant situation. It could have been a cartel situation. We didn't know at the time. John Miller, I want to defend him here because some people are using this clip to attack him, claiming that we don't know motive. Well, that was before the press conference. We now know the motive from the press conference. This is Homeland Security speaking at the press conference about what the evidence is so far.
Violence. It is unfortunately just the most recent example we've seen of targeted violence, to include here in North Texas, where back on July 4th, we saw a coordinated attack carried out against an immigration detention center in Alvarado, Texas. What I can also share with you is that early evidence that we've seen from rounds that were found near the suspected shooter contain messages that are anti-ICE in nature. Again, this is just the most recent example of this type of attack. This will be a whole of government response. There will be no resource not utilized to bring all those individuals who are responsible to bring them to justice and to hold them accountable. While we're not releasing identities of any victims at this time, what I can confirm for you is no.
Kash Patel, who y'all, God bless him. I still think that he needs to stop trying to be the tweeter in chief. Kash Patel has already tweeted out the picture of the rounds, and the bullet actually has written on it anti-ICE. Anti-ICE, ANTIICE. anti-ICE. I wish the director of the FBI would let the local FBI and Homeland Security officials be the ones to do this instead of trying to be the tweeter in chief. But we do have that picture. The shooter did write that. He, by the way, committed suicide. The shooter did. I was telling my team I needed to say something that will be taken, I think, as controversial. And I don't know how to say it, but I think it needs to be said. And there could be blowback on me for saying it. And I'm just going to say it. Y'all bear with me. Buckle up. With the exception of Tyler Robinson, who grew up in a police MAGA household with lots of guns, you can tell that these progressive shooters are bad shots. And they don't know what to. I mean, it was a tragedy what happened in Minnesota. The trans activist sealed kids into a church and could only get 3 of them dead. I mean, there were others wounded, but only killed 3 of them. It could have been a lot worse. In New Hampshire, the Free Palestine activist was able to kill 1 person, wound 2. Could have been a lot worse. He got hit in the head with a chair by someone in the country club. This guy was trying to kill the ICE agents and killed the illegal immigrant instead. I mean, all the deaths are tragedies, but it could be a whole lot worse were it not anti-gun progressives doing the shooting. Look at the ABC station out west. It was an anti-gun activist who opened fire on the ABC station. No one wounded or killed, thankfully. Just shot the place up, missed everybody. I at least, if there is one silver lining in all of the horror, and there's so much horror, it's that progressive anti-gun terrorists aren't great with guns. And the death toll could be a whole lot higher. It's still too high. It is way too high. We continue to see this progressive violence and deaths, but this guy today, based on the initial reporting now, we know he was targeting the ICE agents and wound up killing the immigrant. It could be a lot worse if they had target practice. God have mercy on all the souls of the dead. We are dealing with something outrageous in this country. And by the way, you should know there's polling out from Reuters. Republicans lead Democrats on the question of who is best able to deal with political violence in the country. Not a coincidence. Literally, The Atlantic today is finally running a piece about how left-wing violence is on the rise in this country. And they cast it as, for the last 2 decades, right-wing violence was on the rise, and suddenly it's now left-wing violence on the rise. Well, they mischaracterized a lot of instances to classify them as right-wing when they weren't, to be able to get there. But the fact that The Atlantic is now having to tell progressives that actually left-wing violence is soaring ahead of right-wing violence in this country right now, it's a big red flag that Democrats are starting to realize the violent, bloodthirsty tendencies of their base. And they've provoked this. One more back to CNN. This is Todd Lyons, the director of ICE, on CNN with John Berman earlier today.
I've never seen anything like this in my law enforcement career. I've never seen threats on law enforcement, specifically ICE, increase the way it is. You know, we're up over 1,000% assaults on officers right now. And really just a lot of the talk that's out there, a lot of the rhetoric is just the violence directed towards law enforcement officers just trying to do their job. And we just keep seeing an increase step by step. You know, like I said, we had that shooting at the Alvarado facility, which is right outside Dallas, on July 4th, where they ambushed officers in military tactical gear under the guise of fireworks. And now we have this. And it just seems like it keeps getting worse and worse, and it has to stop.
It does. The ICE agents are just doing their job. And by the way, Donald Trump, you should know, in this Reuters poll also is crushing the Democrats on the issue of who is better able to handle immigration. What they're trying to do is cause a lot of fear. They're trying to essentially drive up the antagonism and stress levels of people doing these jobs so they quit. I don't think it's going to work that way. We've had multiple ICE facilities in Texas attacked. We've had other ICE facilities attacked in the country. I don't think it's going to get better because of the shrill rhetoric of the Democrats. You got Gavin Newsom, after the Charlie Kirk incident, came out with a very heartfelt statement about how he had gotten to know Charlie Kirk and they disagreed on everything. But he didn't deserve to die, and we've got to do something in the country. And now he's on television saying we're in an authoritarian regime and we're not going to have elections in 2028. There's a level of brokenness on the left because they're not in power. They feel helpless and they're turning violent as a request. They don't know what to do other than pick up a gun because, you know, in the mind of the left, and this is very important that you understand this, in the mind of the left, they really do believe the right had turned violent. They really do believe that was how the right was winning, is by becoming violent. And the problem, and it's something I've now been saying on the radio for almost a decade now, is that when you decide to behave the way your opponents behave because you think they're winning by doing something and you start doing it, you become them. And we on the right think the left is becoming violent. And I'm afraid we're going to start becoming violent. But remember, the entirety of the media subculture here on the right has been the right is already violent. And so the leftists decide that's how they won. That's how they won 2024. They're violent. People are scared of them. They must fear us. We're going to pick up guns. And what are they doing? They killed an illegal immigrant today. Critically wounded several ICE agents. It's not the first time this has happened. In Nashville and in Minneapolis, a trans activist killed children in schools. Tyler Robinson decided you couldn't negotiate with Charlie Kirk's hate, and he needed to be eliminated as a result to protect Tyler Robinson's trans partner. The guy in New Hampshire at the golf club screamed "Free Palestine" before opening fire. You have two people who tried to firebomb a Fox News vehicle in Nevada. You have people attacking mourners at memorial services for Charlie Kirk. Shooting up the TV station. It's the left is turning violent. Turning very, very violent. Because they only believe in power. They don't believe in God. They don't even believe in themselves. They believe in a collective control of power, and they've lost it. And they're trying to assert power by other means. And remember, they embraced the Clausewitz phrase that war is politics by other means. And so they're just engaging in political violence now because they see what is happening as violence. And they have an entire philosophy that has been built up by the 1619 Project at the New York Times, by professors on college campuses, by writers in left-wing magazines, that words are violence and they can be responded to with violence, and violence can be met with violence, and it is self-protection, and it is about eliminating the powerful and subverting the dominant paradigm and silencing those who would silence the oppressed. They believe they're doing something good in the process of doing these violent things. And Democrats aren't coming out and denouncing it. Only now the Atlantic is running this piece about violence and how the left is turning violent. Maybe the Democrats will start to get a clue, because the Democrats fear their base right now. They are scared to death of their base. The Democrats in Congress are headed towards a government shutdown, not because they want a government shutdown, but they're scared of getting shot by their base physically if they don't fight the Republicans. And the only way they see to fight is to shut down the government and hand it over to Russ Vogt, which is going to be hilarious watching it happen. But you understand this. The Democrats, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, they are headed towards a government shutdown, not because they want it, but because they are afraid that they will be murdered physically by their base if they don't look like they are fighting Donald Trump at all costs, and that requires a government shutdown. They are physically scared of their own base, and they're willing to deny the elderly Social Security checks because they would rather deny your grandmother a check than possibly get shot by a Democratic partisan progressive activist.
This is your before and after story. Prepare for an incredible career in nursing. At Southeastern College, experience expert hands-on training. Learn real-world skills in our professional lab and simulated settings. And train for opportunities as a practical nurse, registered nurse, or career advancement with our RN to BSN program. At Southeastern College, your future is bright. Visit sac.edu to get started.
Welcome back. It is Eric Erickson here. You can't make this stuff up. You really can't. Where is this? Let me pull this clip here. This is going to blow your mind. Well, maybe not. Maybe not. MSNBC is diving into the ICE shooting in Texas. We now know that it is the left-winger wrote anti-ICE on shell casing. And what does MSNBC do? They decide to say he might have been inspired by the right.
Inspired? Are you worried about copycats?
Yes. I don't know if the rooftop trend is going to be a thing. I mean, it could just be coincidental that the best vantage point just happened to be elevated positions in this case. But people emulating this kind of attack is certainly a concern. The irony with the writing, the first time we really saw that was Brenton Tarrant in the Christchurch shooting in a mosque in New Zealand. And he was a fierce, white supremacist and neo-Nazi, and wrote all over his weapon and his rounds very hateful information. So to see this coming from, potentially the other side of the political spectrum is a little strange. No, it's not. Tyler Robinson did it, and you know who they were inspired by? They weren't inspired by a guy in New Zealand, Mr. MSNBC. They were inspired by Luigi Mangione. Luigi Mangione is the guy who did this, and ever since Mangione did it, progressive activists have been doing it to their shell casings, to their rounds. This has nothing to do with people on the right. You morons at MSNBC just can't blame people on the left. You got to blame people on the right. Americans for Prosperity would like for you guys to get involved in fighting for the right. They would like for you to help advance freedom in this country, and you can do so by going to afpvolunteer.com. They're trying to get 250,000 Americans to take a step for freedom in their communities in time for the 250th anniversary of the country. And if 250,000 of us did engage in advancing freedom in our local communities, we would make the nation freer in time for our birthday. You can find out more at afpvolunteer.com. Americans for Prosperity is the largest leading grassroots group in the country. They happen to be on the right. They happen to be advancing conservatism across the country. They'd love to get you involved. afpvolunteer.com. Advance freedom in your local community. Move the ball forward for this country in time for our 250th birthday. afpvolunteer.com. Greetings, conversationalists. It is Eric Erickson here. I will keep you up to date as we learn more about the ICE situation, but I got to move on to other things. And I want to start with, first of all, Brian Stelter from CNN. And if you will recall, Brian Stelter in 2020 had on Michael Avenatti before he went to prison and built up his potential as a challenger to Donald Trump in the 2020 primaries. I don't really know that Brian has that much of a pulse on the public or politics, but this was him on CNN yesterday before the return of Jimmy Kimmel.
he's probably going to have the biggest audience of his career, and he can say just about anything. In some ways, Kimmel's now the safest person on TV, with the most freedom, the most autonomy, because ABC has actively, constructively chosen to bring him back on television, despite President Trump's criticism, despite the FCC's threats, despite all of this attention in the past week.
That's one of the most boneheaded things I think I've heard on TV. This is not Jimmy Kimmel coming back at his most powerful and safest. This is him coming back for his valedictory address. He's headed off into the sunset. Sinclair and Nexstar are not running his show. He's costing ABC advertisers and money. They suspended him, contrary to what even CNN was reporting and others were reporting in the last week. He was not pushed out by the FCC. We now know it was because he was going to become even more incendiary on the Wednesday night after the situation blew up, and ABC needed a cooling off period for him. We know that affiliates complained. We know that advertisers complained, but the American Press Corps, because they're on the left, they believed the left-wing narrative that it was Brendan Carr's pressure. If it was Brendan Carr's pressure, he would still be off the air today. Instead, they brought him back a few days later, letting the situation cool down. The left gets to claim that they got a scalp with Brendan Carr. The right got to claim Jimmy Kimmel's scalp last week. Bob Iger reigned supreme. The idea from Brian Stelter, who really is in the progressive hive mind and is an articulator of the conventional wisdom of progressives, is that Jimmy Kimmel is somehow now super safe. No. I'm going to be surprised if Kimmel's contract is renewed, and if it is renewed at the salary that he's making, because he's costing ABC money. CBS is winding down Stephen Colbert, contrary again to what people on the left think, not because of Donald Trump, but because he's costing them money. They don't have eyeballs. Back in the day, you had the late night shows, and the thinking was that they're going to leave it on Carson when they go to bed. When they get up in the morning, it's going to be the Today Show, and they're going to stick with us. And it was great for ratings. And guess what? That strategy worked, the carryover effect. You'd go to bed with Johnny Carson at night, and you'd wake up the next morning, and the Today Show would be on. And guess what? The ratings for the Today Show were always dominant because people were getting up, turning on the TV. It was still on NBC. Those days are gone now. I turn on my TV in the office and it goes to software, and you got to pick your options. It doesn't work that way. But the media is convinced that this was an infringement of free speech by the FCC. It's why Brendan Carr, by the way, should have never said anything. I like him, considering we've got a great relationship personally. I know him. I know his team. They're good people. He never should have said anything. I'm also friends with Jake Tapper. And I got to play you. Jake Tapper was on TV the other night. See if I can find the clip here with Jon Stewart. Let me play you. Nope, that's the wrong clip. Where'd it go? Anyway, Jake Tapper was on television and said that Jimmy Kimmel censorship was, in his lifetime, the worst censorship that he could recall from the government. And I have to tell you, I'm friends with Jake. I vehemently disagree with Jake. I don't think this is the worst censorship from the government at all. In fact, I think what happened to the American people during COVID was worse. I think what happened to the New York Post was worse than what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. The New York Post got its social media feeds suppressed by Democrats, not even by the government, by the pressure from Democrats and outside national security experts. I think it was not good. Now I see what happened. I told Charlie to get the clip, and then it was not the right clip. This is Jake Tapper on with Seth Meyers. It's worth you guys hearing this clip.
All right, Jimmy Kimmel. He's a friend of both of ours.
Yeah.
You know him, I know him. We know he's a good person. Obviously, this news is very exciting. But what was your original take on how this all went down starting last week?
I mean, I thought it was pretty much the most direct infringement by the government on free speech that I've seen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
You know what? I disagree with this, and here's why. We now know from Facebook and Google and Twitter that in 2021 in particular, in 2021, when Joe Biden came into office, social media companies came under inordinate pressure from President Biden's team to demonetize, cancel, and suppress the accounts of private American citizens. Members of the press think when something happens to members of the press, it's the worst thing ever. But actually, you know, there are members of the press, and Jake is not one of these, by the way, but there are members of the press who think that the freedom of the press and the First Amendment belongs only to them. There are young reporters I have seen routinely on Twitter insist that they themselves have First Amendment protection and you don't. Google admitted to Jim Jordan in a letter yesterday that the Biden administration pressured them to suspend, cancel, and expel people from YouTube for spreading COVID disinformation. The reason members of the media don't think that's the biggest infringement ever of free speech in this country is because a lot of the people who were putting stuff on there actually were putting a bunch of nonsense up that was harmful to people. So it was in their minds a civic good, but that's not how the First Amendment works. The First Amendment means you need more speech, not less speech. In all cases, more speech. But the press is outraged about Jimmy Kimmel because he's a friend. He's a personal friend of Jake's. Jimmy Kimmel is a friend to a lot of members of the press. So they're outraged on his behalf. And they're, frankly, I think, also outraged because they think if it can happen to him, it can happen to any one of us. And we need to circle the wagons and rally the flag and prevent this from happening again. And I get that. And I get that many of the accounts turned off by YouTube were nutters spreading conspiracy theories. But that doesn't matter. The First Amendment is for the American people. And the Biden administration wasn't targeting a celebrity with millions of social media followers who makes lots of money, who could get on social media and continue to do the same thing and get a Substack and monetize himself and be just fine. They were targeting individual American citizens. They were silencing the people, not a celebrity. And they weren't just silencing one person. They were silencing thousands of people. And they weren't doing it themselves, like with ABC. People have used the word jawboning, inserted themselves, pressuring private companies to do what the government directly could not do. That's what Joe Biden was doing to Twitter and to Facebook and to Google. And the way the media processes this is the most damning indictment of the worldview of the press, frankly. They're processing it as these companies are just telling Republicans what they want to hear. See, if they say this, if they say that these companies are targeting or are telling people what they want to hear, they can be dismissive of what the companies are saying. Oh, they're just afraid of getting bullied by Jim Jordan and Donald Trump, so they're telling them what they want to hear. It allows them to dismiss it. Aaron Rupar is a progressive who does a lot of gotcha social media clips for the left. He put up this tweet after Kash Patel noted that the shooter had anti-ICE written on his casing. You cannot trust information coming from Kash Patel's FBI. You cannot trust information coming from ICE. You cannot trust information coming from the Trump administration. You cannot trust information coming from the Republicans. He's a partisan progressive, but that's the view in the editorial meetings of the press as well. He's reflective of the progressive mindset that's within the American Press Corps. Because it's Jim Jordan who released the letter from Google, because Mark Zuckerberg, who said it was a shakedown from the Biden administration, was telling Republicans that under oath. They're like, oh, they were just telling the Republicans what they want to hear. It's not true. How can we believe Jim Jordan? He's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. They don't want to be targeted. They're telling what they want to hear. It's a very easy way for the press to have to dismiss the implications that the Biden administration was censoring not celebrities who would have large platforms to still get out their message, but censoring an American citizen whose only platform was their YouTube account with a few thousand followers. It's actually far worse to censor private American citizens on behalf of the government than to pull Jimmy Kimmel for less than a week. It's far worse to cancel an American citizen than to cancel Jimmy Kimmel's TV show. Because in the words of Brian Stelter, when they were going after Fox News and the media was perfectly fine targeting Fox News, freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. When your only reach is your YouTube account, and that's the only way you have to get out your message, and Joe Biden says shut it down or we're targeting you, and you shut it down, that is killing someone's free speech. But Jimmy Kimmel could get picked up by Comedy Central. He can get picked up by HBO. He can get on Twitter or Instagram or any of a variety of social media services and get his message out to millions of people. But Kooky Mom 318, who believes essential oil kills COVID, her only platform was her Twitter account and her Facebook, and the government shut it down or had the private company shut it down. And you can say, well, it needed to be shut down. She's Kooky Mom telling people take frankincense, it would cure their COVID. But she had the right under the Constitution to say that. And your response should not be to silence her. Your response should be better speech. I completely agree that there were a lot of people saying crazy things. But you know what? Some of the things you thought were crazy, members of the media, turned out to be true. 2 weeks to stop the spread didn't stop the spread. I see the Affleck kid testifying to the UN about the masks and trying to force everybody on the planet to wear masks. Masking didn't work. Some because people wore the masks wrong, some because of the mask type, some because people just weren't going to wear them. You're not going to force people into masks. The vaccine that everyone insisted would stop the virus never stopped the virus. And by the way, when people on social media were saying that the vaccine is not going to stop the virus, their accounts were turned off by social media companies at the behest of the Biden administration, and they were right. And you were wrong. I have a good relationship with Jake Tapper. I respect the news, the work that he does. But the biggest attack on the First Amendment in my lifetime is not what happened to Jimmy Kimmel for less than a week that involved advertisers and affiliates, not just the chairman of the FCC. The biggest attack on free speech in my lifetime was what happened to ordinary Americans on social media in 2021 when the Biden administration told social media accounts to turn off those accounts, demonetize them, and suppress them. Because what happened to Jimmy Kimmel was a temporary suspension from a network. And Kimmel could have gone out the same day and used his name to get a massive following somewhere else. But the individual Americans who had their accounts turned off, suspended, blacklisted, they don't have Jimmy Kimmel's platform. And while you or I may have disagreed with what they were saying, it was their right to say it. And the Biden administration, knowing they couldn't shut them down, got the tech companies to shut them down and violate their free speech. And in some cases, demonetized them, took money from them. And I think it would behoove every member of the press to recognize that if you're outraged about what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, even though you and I disagree with what a lot of these people were saying on social media, that is a bigger assault on the First Amendment when the government targets small private citizens no one's ever heard of before except on social media and forces private companies to suppress their speech. That's a much bigger attack on the First Amendment than what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson. The phone number 877-973-7425. Well. Speaking of attacks on free speech that are the worst thing ever, a district court in New York has just declared Douglas Mackey acquitted of all charges. If the name doesn't sound familiar, when Barack Obama was president of the United States and we were in the 2016 election, a man named Douglas Mackey on a social media account under the name of Ricky Vaughn tweeted, he had a very limited following, that you didn't actually have to go vote on Election Day. You could text your vote to a number if you wanted to vote. And apparently one or two stupid people decided they would try it. The Biden administration prosecuted Douglas Mackey for his tweet. And he was found guilty by a New York jury in a federal court of undermining people's civil rights by depriving them of their right to vote because he tweeted, "You can text your vote." He never should have been prosecuted. One, because the people who believed him were clearly idiots. Maybe they had taken Tylenol. And two, it was a tweet. It was a tweet. It was words. And it was appealed. The federal court appellate process worked and threw out the case, and he's now acquitted as of today. Do not tell me what happened to Jimmy Kimmel was the biggest assault on free speech by the federal government ever, because a man was prosecuted for a tweet and went to jail because of it, because of a tweet. That's where the big free speech assault came from. Eden Pure would like to send you their thunderstorms. You can get 3 of them for less than $200 and save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. All you have to do is go to EdenPureDeals.com, put in the discount code ERIC3, ERICK3. Then you'll get 3 of them. They're air purifiers. They get rid of dust and pollen. They get rid of pet dander. They kill 99.9% of bacteria and viruses that flow through the machine, and then they generate ozone and wipe out odors. No odor can stand up to it. Wet dog odor, litter box odor, smoke odors, frying shrimp in the kitchen odors, musty odors. I've used them in rental cars. You can plug it up with a USB cord, or you can plug it directly into the wall. EdenPureDeals.com is the discount code. EdenPureDeals.com. Then that's the website. The discount code is ERIC3, ERICK3. You'll get 3 of them. You'll save $200. You'll get them for less than $200. You get them for upstairs, downstairs, your basement, your travel bag, your RV. You can hold it in your hand. I keep one in my travel bag, and they just work. EdenPureDeals.com, discount code ERIC3. Clean up the dirty smells wherever you are. You can thank me later. They really do work. EdenPureDeals.com.